My husband planned to use me even after we split. But my comeback shattered his plans. The stemware chimed softly as people moved through the snug purple leaf wine shop in Tucson's historic district. Between the lamplight and the racks of bottles, Nema Caldwell glided from table to table, topping off glasses and answering questions with the quiet assurance of someone who had built this place with her own hands. She paused beside an older couple inspecting an Argentine Malbec and tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. That one's a gem, she told them, leaning closer. High-altitude vineyards, over 6,000 feet. The grapes get cool nights and sharp sun, so the wine turns out deep but mineral, not heavy. The woman smiled. Have you been to the vineyard? Not yet, Nema admitted, still cheerful. The winemaker came for last year's festival, though. We talked for hours. Next time he visits, he promised to bring drone footage of the whole estate. It was one of her monthly tasting nights, always on the last Friday. She never drew huge crowds, maybe 15 people or so, but that suited her. Small groups meant she could place little boards of cheese and crusty bread between the shelves, talk with everyone, and keep the atmosphere intimate. Half classroom, half living room. 6 years earlier, when she first opened Purple Leaf, the place had been nothing but an awkward old warehouse with cracked brick walls and high ceilings that made everything echo. Nema had personally chosen the warm wooden paneling that now covered parts of the brick, the gentle track lighting that washed over bottle labels instead of glaring in people's faces. The shop had become a reflection of her taste and her work ethic, and she felt a quiet swell of pride every time someone lingered as if they didn't want to leave. From near the register, she heard a familiar voice. You've outdone yourself, Nema. She turned to see Caleb, a silver-haired professor from the university, cradling a glass of Washington Red. He was one of her earliest regulars. Those Washington producers keep surprising me, he said. Every year, they're better. I've been hunting down small vineyards that don't sell to the chains yet, Nema replied. They still care more about personality than volume. Purple Leaf wasn't a big box store and never would be, but it had loyal patrons who trusted Nema's instinct for unusual bottles and her meticulous attention to detail. As she chatted with Caleb, she noticed her phone light up on the counter. A message flashed across the screen. Don't wait up. Meeting a potential collector. It was from her husband. Nema pressed the power button and turned the screen dark. He hadn't come to a single tasting night in 3 months. 6 years ago, when they met, the idea that he would ever be absent from her life in this way would have seemed impossible. Her thoughts drifted to the first night she saw him, at a contemporary art exhibit. He'd been standing in front of a strange installation made of bent metal rods and shards of glass lit from within by blue and white LEDs. Something about fragility and human connection in a digital age. Nema had gone only to keep a friend company and didn't know much about contemporary art, but she found herself drawn to the artist more than the piece. You've been staring at this for 15 minutes, he had said, appearing at her side with a crooked smile. Either you adore it or you're completely baffled. There had been no arrogance in his tone, just curiosity and a dry humor that disarmed her. He introduced himself as Makey Queenland, 5 years older than she was, expressive hands always in motion as he talked about art and meaning and the pointlessness of painting pretty pictures to match hotel carpets. He spoke like someone burning from the inside out, always reaching for something bigger. A week later, he invited her to his studio, a sprawling loft with giant windows and canvases stacked against every wall. Wire sculptures lay on tables, sketches covered cork boards, and everything smelled faintly of turpentine and metal. I want to make work that doesn't let people stay comfortable, he told her, showing her piece after piece. Not decorative noise. Something that gets under their skin. Nema had believed him. Believed in him. At the time, she didn't know that 3 years after they married, that intense artist would be gone, replaced by a man lying on the couch with his phone, scrolling through the lives of more successful people, muttering about how rigged the art world was. By the time she locked up the shop that night, the last customers were gone, the cheese boards cleared and the glasses soaking. It was nearly 11. She drove home to their small bungalow in the Sam Hughes neighborhood, once a joint dream and now mostly a reminder of how lopsided their lives had become. Makey wasn't there, but his presence was scattered everywhere. A half-finished coffee growing cold on the side table, art magazines fanned across the couch, a sandwich abandoned on the kitchen counter. She sank onto the sofa, rubbing her temples. The house used to feel like the two of them. His ideas, her order. Now it felt like a museum devoted to his laziness. 2 years earlier, he'd been thrilled about a new series of works and a planned exhibition in Santa Fe. Then the gallery owner lost interest, stopped responding, and Makey had slipped into a sulk that turned into paralysis. At first, Nema had tried to boost him up, suggesting options, visiting shows with him, encouraging him to experiment. But slowly it became clear that he wasn't just blocked, he'd simply stopped trying. The front door slammed around midnight. Makey stumbled in the smell of whiskey and smoke. How was the meeting with the collector? Nema asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. He didn't show, Makey grunted, flinging his jacket over the nearest chair. Send a last-minute message. Some emergency. I'm sorry, she said automatically, though a small, exhausted part of her doubted that any collector had been part of the evening. Sure you are, he said, his mouth twisting. You love it. Fits your narrative, doesn't it? Keeps me in the failure box. That's not fair, Nema replied, feeling the familiar weight of these evenings settle on her shoulders. You know I've always backed your work. Backed? He echoed bitterly, yanking open the fridge and grabbing a beer. You run your little shop, make your money, and remind me how expensive everything is. I get it. You're the success. I'm the burden. She swallowed. All I ever say is that the shop is demanding. Which it is. I'm proud of what I've built. Oh, of course, he said, popping the cap off the bottle. You're a serious entrepreneur. I'm just the guy who doesn't bring in a paycheck. It's not about the paycheck, it's about effort, she said, feeling anger stir beneath her tiredness. You haven't painted anything in a year. Creativity doesn't work on a time clock, he shot back. This isn't your inventory list. You can't force it. You can at least show up for it, she replied quietly. Sit in front of a canvas. Go to a life drawing class. Something. He snorted. Easy for you to say. Daddy helped with your down payment and suddenly you're a self-made success. The jab hit its mark. Her father had given her the initial lump sum that allowed her to rent the space for Purple Leaf, but she'd taken loans, worked 16-hour days, and paid him back every penny with interest. For the last 3 years she had also quietly covered the rent on Makey's studio. I repaid him completely, she said, her voice shaking. And I've paid your studio rent, too. You know that. There it is, he said, pointing his finger as if he'd caught her in a lie. The truth. You've been waiting to say that. It's all money with you. No, she said, now more sad than angry. It's your refusal to do anything. If you were trying, I'd help you forever. But you just complain and tear others down. He started on a familiar monologue, about the corrupt art scene, about the gatekeepers, about hacks who sold out to advertising agencies. Nema listened for a while, then finally turned away. I don't want to fight, she said. But I can't live in this loop. Something has to change. She went to the bedroom and closed the door on his muttered accusations. In the silence that followed, she lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and listening to the muffled sound of whatever show he had on in the living room. The thought came again, slower but sharper than before. I can't do this forever. For now, though, she said nothing. She let the thought settle like dust at the back of her mind and waited for sleep that took its time arriving. A few weeks later, under a sky so bright it seemed unforgiving, Nema stood in Evergreen Cemetery with her fingers locked around a bouquet of white lilies. The air was hot and dry, but people in dark suits clustered in the shade of the trees, murmuring politely. The minister's voice floated over the quiet, speaking of rest and mercy, words that seemed to reach Nema as if through thick glass. Her father's name had been Montgomery Caldwell, though almost everyone called him Monty. He liked lilies, not because they were soft, but but because they were stark and dignified. He'd always claimed they matched his principles: unbending, simple, dependable. He had died like he had lived, at a conference table in a suit, talking about investments, his heart failing without warning. No long goodbyes, no slow decline, just a single line abruptly cut off. Nema felt someone touch her arm lightly. She turned to see Makey standing beside her, face composed in the appropriate mask of grief, though his eyes seemed distant. He was wearing a dark suit she hadn't seen on him in years, the same one he'd worn to an opening in Phoenix back when galleries still returned his calls. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Her father and her husband had never gotten along. Her father was a pragmatist, suspicious of people who lived on concepts rather than on numbers. Makey, bruised by every remark about stability and responsibility, had called her father a soulless calculator behind his back. Over the years their meetings had settled into a pattern of stiff politeness and barbed after-dinner complaints. When the ceremony ended and people began to drift toward their cars, Nema had to pass through a line of condolences, shaking hands, accepting hugs. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Makey detach himself and gravitate toward a group of men in expensive suits, her father's business associates, speaking animatedly, gesturing, even typing something on his phone. Once, he would have avoided them, dismissing them as the suits. Now, he seemed eager to impress. Veronica, her father's longtime assistant, approached with damp eyes and a careful voice. Then Eugene Brooks, her father's lawyer and an old family friend, asked to speak with her when she was ready. "There are formalities we'll need to go through," he said gently. "But not today. Call me when you've had some time." After the burial, there was a reception at the country club where Monty had been a member for decades. Nema sat at the main table, hearing herself say thank you again and again while her mind wandered. Makey moved from group to group, laughing and gesturing as if he had lost a colleague rather than a father-in-law he frequently mocked. The sight left a sour taste in her mouth. She remembered a conversation with Monty months after her wedding. They'd been alone in his study. He had looked at her with that long, assessing gaze she knew from childhood. "He's using you, sweetheart," he had said quietly. "I can see it. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I see." "You don't understand creative people," she'd argued. "He's not like you. He doesn't think about balance sheets. That doesn't make him bad." "It's not about his art," Monty had replied. "It's about his core. He puts himself first. You deserve someone who looks out for you the way you look out for them." At the time, she'd been angry, convinced he was misjudging Makey. Now, watching her husband hold court with men he used to dismiss, she wondered how much her father had seen that she'd chosen to ignore. On the way home from the reception, the car was quiet for a while. Then Makey broke the silence. "What were you and Eugene talking about?" Nema asked, keeping her eyes on the road. "Just the will." Makey watched her face. "You know, practical things. You asked my father's lawyer about the inheritance at the funeral?" Nema's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "When are we supposed to ask?" he shot back. "He was a wealthy man. You're his only child. That affects both of us." "We," she repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, we," he said, more forcefully. "I'm your husband. His estate concerns our future." "What exactly did you ask?" she pressed. "When the will be read, what assets are involved, if there are any restrictions," he answered. "Normal questions." "And what did he say?" "Nothing useful," Makey muttered. "Lawyers never do. At the appropriate time, Ms. Caldwell will be informed, that kind of thing." Nema stared straight ahead. Her father's body had barely cooled in the ground, and her husband was already calculating what his death could buy them. Later that evening, sitting on their porch while the sun slid behind the mountains, Nema thought about the man who had raised her. Monty had not been soft. He'd worked long hours and often seemed more comfortable discussing markets than emotions. But he had come to every school event, supported every decision she made, and when she wanted to open a wine shop, He had given her the seed money without asking for control. You know, she said aloud, not sure why she was speaking. Dad always wanted me to get an MBA. He said I could grow the shop bigger, open multiple locations, if I had the right tools. He was right, Makey replied. You could have scaled this thing years ago. I like the scale it's at, Nema said. I like knowing my customers. That's your problem, Makey said flatly. You're scared of thinking bigger. Nema looked at him, startled. Since when do you agree with my father? Makey shrugged. He knew how to make money. I can respect that, even if I didn't share his values. Not long ago, he'd called Monty a status-obsessed numbers robot. Now he was aligning himself with the man's philosophy. The shift felt less like growth and more like calculation. The next morning, Nema woke to the sound of drawers opening and closing. She found Makey in the study, rifling through papers. What are you doing? She asked. Looking for Eugene's card, he said. We need a meeting. No, Nema replied. I need to meet with Eugene about my father's estate. You can know the outcome, but the meetings are between me and him. So you don't trust me, he said, straightening to face her, anger rising. It's not about trust, she said, though it was partly that. It's about respect. For my father, and for me. He scoffed. Your father never respected me. To him, I was nothing. Just an artist, and a drain. You're twisting his words, Nema said, but he was already winding himself up again, complaining about Monty's coldness and snobbery. Then he said something that froze her mid-breath. Maybe it's better that he's gone. At least now his money will finally do something worthwhile. What did you just say? She whispered. He didn't take it back, didn't apologize. The man in front of her suddenly seemed like a stranger. Get out of my room, she said quietly. Come on, he said, rolling his eyes. You're being dramatic. Out, she repeated. He left, muttering under his breath. Nema sat down, heart pounding. Her father had never been easy, but he had loved her and backed her. The person she'd married was willing to treat his death as a financial opportunity. In that moment, the last strands of denial snapped. Her marriage wasn't damaged. It was rotten. Her father had been right. Makey didn't just lean on her, he drained her. By the time the Arizona sky lightened the next morning, Nema had made up her mind. She showered, dressed in jeans and a white blouse, and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She read everything she could find about divorce in Arizona, community property, separate property, inheritance rules. She learned that the state divided marital assets equally, but that inheritances remained separate if kept apart. She took notes in a small notebook, underlining key phrases. With every new fact, her decision solidified. When Makey shuffled into the kitchen, yawning as if the previous day had been ordinary, he poured himself coffee and sat across from her. About yesterday, he began in a softer tone. I went too far. I know your father cared about you. I respected him, in my way. Nema watched him. This was his pattern, attack, then smooth things over just enough to keep everything from collapsing. He would say just enough to make her doubt herself. I want a divorce, she said, her voice steady. His hand stopped halfway to his mouth. You what? I want a divorce, she repeated. Our marriage is making us both miserable. I won't live like this anymore. He tried every angle he had, minimizing, blaming grief, suggesting she wait, accusing her of overreacting. When that failed, he turned cold. You're doing this now, he said, voice hardening. Right when the inheritance is coming. Convenient. This isn't about inheritance, she replied. This has been building for years. You know it. He smirked. You can tell yourself that. But you'll see. I'm not walking away with nothing. What does that mean? Half, he said. Half the house, half the business, and a fair share of whatever your father left you. I've been here for 6 years. I'm entitled. She folded her hands. The inheritance is legally separate, she said. And the shop existed before we married. He gave her a thin smile. Any lawyer will tell you the increase in value counts. You built it while I was your partner. That makes it ours. Later that day, shaken but resolute, Nema drove downtown to Eugene's office. She hadn't called ahead, she just knew she needed someone on her side who understood both the law and her father. Fortunately, Eugene was in. He listened quietly as she explained the situation, her decision to divorce, Mackey's demands. He says he's entitled to half of everything, she concluded. That's an overstatement, Eugene said. He does have some rights, but not as many as he thinks, especially regarding the inheritance. He removed his glasses, rubbing them slowly with a cloth, then put them back on. Your father anticipated this possibility, he added. He left some specific structures in place. We were going to go over them at our scheduled meeting, but given what you've told me, I'd like to explain now. Nema leaned forward. What did he do? He set up a family trust, Eugene said. All of his assets pass into that trust. You are the sole beneficiary, but the trust is designed to protect those assets from claims by a spouse in the event of divorce. The words washed over her like cool water. So Mackey can't get to it? No, Eugene said with a small, satisfied nod. He cannot. Your father consulted excellent counsel. The trust terms are airtight. Your inheritance is safe. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding escaped all at once. For the first time since Monty's death, she felt something like relief. Thank you, she whispered, grateful not only to Eugene, but to her father, who had quietly planned for a future he suspected she might face without him. The following week blurred into a carousel of meetings and documents. Eugene coordinated with a family law attorney named Martha Leonard, a sharp-eyed woman who listened more than she spoke. Nema hired her officially, and Martha began laying out possibilities. Property division, negotiations, worst-case scenarios. Meanwhile, Mackey moved out, taking his clothes, some sketchbooks, and a handful of artworks that Nema was almost relieved to see gone. On the third day after he left, she received notice from Martha that he'd retained one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in Tucson, a man named Raymond Prescott, whose reputation for pushing cases into drawn-out battles was well known. He's asking for half the house, half the business, spousal support, and a piece of the inheritance, Martha told Nema, flipping through the demand letter with a dry expression. Plus compensation for emotional distress due to your alleged coldness and undermining attitude. Nema let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Emotional distress, she repeated. Of course. It's a tactic, Martha said. Start as high as possible so you have room to compromise. Don't let it get under your skin. Nema tried not to. Still, each new accusation made her chest tighten. This was the man she had supported, promoted, defended to her father and friends. Now he was painting her as some sort of heartless tyrant. After one particularly draining appointment, she left Martha's office feeling hollow. Sitting in her car, she closed her eyes and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. Her phone rang, startling her. The caller ID showed Rowena's name. How did it go? Rowena asked, skipping any greeting. The usual, Nema said. Demands. Legal talk. Threats via paperwork. Rowena swore under her breath. You are coming over tonight, she declared. I'm cooking. We're opening that Italian bottle you brought me last year, and I forbid any detailed divorce talk longer than 2 minutes. Nema hesitated, then agreed. That evening, she parked in front of Rowena's little bungalow, only a few streets away from her own. The front yard was a burst of color even in the desert climate, row upon row of flowers surrounding a slightly lopsided birdbath. Rowena, short and freckled with a cloud of red hair, opened the door with a grin and pulled Nema into a hug. Inside, the table was set and the smell of garlic and seafood filled the house. They ate pasta, sipped wine, and let the conversation drift. Rowena talked about odd antiques that had wandered into her shop, about eccentric customers, About a horror movie she regretted watching alone. For a few hours, Nema was just herself again, not a client or a spouse in a court case. "You know what I've been thinking," Rowena said at one point, topping off their glasses. "Remember our old college dream?" "Which one?" Nema asked. "There were a few. The wine and antiques place," Rowena said. "Vines and times. You'd run the bottles, I'd handle the odd old things." Nema smiled. "Of course I remember. So maybe now is the time," Rowena said. "You're about to have more financial flexibility. I've saved a little. We could find a bigger spot, combine forces." "It's tempting," Nema admitted. "But right now everything's tangled up with the divorce and the trust. I have to move carefully." "That's exactly why it's a good time," Rowena said. "Anything new you start after the divorce is finalized is safe. Completely yours." Nema laughed, warmed by her friend's stubborn optimism. "Let's revisit it after the reading and first hearing," she said. "If things settle, we'll see." In the days that followed, Nema tried to maintain her routine. She opened Purple Leaf each morning, checked inventory, chatted with customers about tannins and vintages. The familiar tasks grounded her. Still, stress pressed at the edges of her focus, especially after a call from Martha. "Prescott wants an informal meeting," Martha told her, "just to explore settlement options." "Do you think he's serious?" Nema asked. "Possibly," Martha said. "Or he wants to gauge your reactions before reading. Either way, we should go." As if that weren't enough, another phone call disrupted what little peace she'd managed to assemble. It came early one morning from an unfamiliar number. "This is Nema," she answered cautiously. Hi," said a woman's voice. "My name's Layla. You don't know me, but I think we should talk. It's about your husband." Nema's stomach clenched. "My ex-husband," she corrected automatically, though the divorce wasn't final yet. "Right," the woman said. I've been seeing him. He told me you were separated, that the divorce was basically done. But some things he's said recently. I realized he's lying to both of us. I think you should see them." Nema closed her eyes. "I don't really need to know the details," she said. She already knew Makey hadn't been faithful. The private investigator's photos had shown that clearly. "Please," the woman insisted. "It's not about me and him. It's about what he's planning with your money." That made Nema pause. Eventually, they arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. When Nema walked in, she immediately spotted the woman waiting, mid-20s, neat dark hair, nervous hands wrapped around a coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," Layla said as Nema sat down. "I know this is awkward." "What did you want to tell me?" Nema asked, keeping her voice even. Layla took a breath. "I met him about 8 months ago at an exhibition. He was charming, said he'd help me with my gallery career, and introduced me to collectors. We started a relationship. He said you two were basically just roommates waiting for paperwork." Nema listened without flinching. Her hurt about the cheating had already burned out. Now she felt something more like weariness. "After your father died," Layla continued, "he started talking about money all the time. He said you'd inherit a fortune, and because Arizona is a community property state, half of whatever you got would be his. He's been planning around that." She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a message. "He sent this yesterday," she said, passing the screen to Nema. The text read, "Everything's going as planned. Once the will is read, there'll be enough to open a gallery. Prescott knows how to get my share. We'll celebrate after Wednesday." Nema handed the phone back. This wasn't news so much as confirmation. Makey hadn't just reacted greedily. He had structured his future around exploiting her. "Why are you showing me this?" Nema asked gently. "You're under no obligation." Layla looked ashamed and angry at the same time. "Because he used me too," she said. "Once I introduced him to the collectors he wanted, he detached. Cold." And then he started talking about using your inheritance to fund his big comeback. I realized I wasn't a partner. I was just another tool. She straightened. If you need me to testify, I will. You can use the text. Nema nodded. Thank you. It means a lot that you reached out. I'm sorry he pulled you into his mess. After they parted ways, Nema drove straight to Martha's office and showed her the screenshot. This could be useful, Martha said after reading it. It speaks to intent. If he tries to claim he's just seeking fairness, this makes it clear he's targeting your inheritance. I don't want to drag her into a court fight if she doesn't have to testify, Nema said. She's already been hurt. We'll see, Martha replied. Sometimes just knowing we have a witness is enough. The informal settlement meeting took place the next week in a hotel conference room. Nema arrived in a plain dark suit with her hair neatly pulled back, Martha at her side with a file folder under one arm. Makey was already there with Prescott, looking polished in his best suit, jaw tight. Prescott began with practiced courtesy, laying out numbers, percentages, proposed divisions. He insisted that fairness required Makey to receive a significant portion of the business value and some share of the inheritance, given his emotional support during crucial years, as he put it. Martha countered calmly, pointing out that Purple Leaf predated the marriage and had grown primarily through Nema's labor and capital, while Makey had not contributed financially or professionally. Regarding the inheritance, she referenced state law and gently but firmly refused to place it on the negotiation table. As the discussion dragged on, Makey grew impatient. He jumped in repeatedly, accusing Nema of painting him as a leech, of wanting to erase his part in her life. You're acting like I never did anything for you, he said, voice rising. Like I was just dead weight. Martha raised a hand. Mr. Queenland, interrupting will not help your case. Please let your attorney speak for you. We're getting nowhere, Prescott finally said, exhaling. Maybe we should reconvene after the will reading. Once the scope of the inheritance is clear, my client may reassess his position. That's acceptable, Martha replied. In the hallway afterward, as Nema and Martha walked toward the elevators, Makey caught up to them, his composed mask slipping. You think this is over? He hissed. You think whatever your father set up will save you? You forget I know you, Nema. I know things other people don't. I won't hesitate to use them. Martha stepped between them slightly. Threatening my client in front of witnesses is unwise, Mr. Queenland. He glared at both of them before turning on his heel and stalking back toward Prescott. Nema felt a tremor in her hands, not from fear of what he might reveal, but from the reminder of how he operated. Through intimidation, through suggestion, through making people question themselves. That night, Rowena brought wine and chocolates and sat on Nema's porch railing, feet swinging. So he hinted at some deep dark secret? Rowena said. Textbook manipulation. Don't feed it. I know, Nema said, though a small stone of anxiety still sat in her chest. It's just that he's capable of twisting anything into a weapon. If you haven't done anything illegal or truly awful, Rowena said, then what are we even talking about? A bad haircut in college? A weird ex? Let him talk to himself. You've spent enough years listening. Nema laughed despite her nerves. Still, the coming reading loomed ahead of her like a test she hadn't studied for, even though Eugene had assured her everything was in order. The next morning, she stood in front of the courthouse, took a deep breath, and walked inside, ready to see exactly what her father had done to protect her. The courtroom was cool and solemn, with dark wood paneling and straight-backed benches. Nema sat at the front with Martha, her hands folded tightly in her lap. On the other side of the aisle, Makey and Prescott sat together, the former shifting restlessly, the latter studying documents with a practiced calm. Eugene occupied a seat near the judge's bench, his briefcase at his feet. He looked composed, as if this were another day at work rather than the opening of her father's final words. When Judge Harden finally entered, a solid man with a grizzled beard and sharp eyes, everyone stood. We are here to address the will of the late Montgomery Caldwell, he said. Let me remind everyone that this is not a divorce hearing. We are here to address inheritance and nothing more. I expect decorum from all parties." He glanced pointedly toward Makey before turning to Eugene. "Mr. Brooks, you may proceed." Eugene handed up a packet of documents, which the judge skimmed. Then Eugene stepped back, opened a folder, and began reading the will in a clear, even tone. It started with the usual formalities, revoking previous wills, confirming Eugene as executor. Nema listened with half an ear, her attention narrowing as he reached the part about the estate itself. "All of my property, including real estate, financial holdings, and other assets," Eugene read, "are transferred to the Caldwell Family Trust, established by me and recently amended. I name my daughter, Nema Elizabeth Caldwell, as the sole beneficiary." At that, Makey sat up straighter, eyes sharpening. He leaned toward Prescott and whispered something. Prescott's expression tightened, but he said nothing. "The trust terms are detailed in a separate document, which has been filed with the court," Eugene continued. "The trustee, myself, is authorized to manage the assets for the benefit of the beneficiary. The beneficiary may receive income and, under specified conditions, access principal. I wish to highlight Clause 7. He turned a page, his voice steady. Clause 7 states that the trust assets are not subject to division in the event of the beneficiary's divorce, current or future, and may not be claimed by any spouse or former spouse. This clause is structured in accordance with Arizona law, which treats inheritance as separate property." Makey shot to his feet. "He can't just cut me out like that," he burst out. "I'm her husband." The judge fixed him with a hard stare. "Sit down, Mr. Queenland. Any further outbursts, and I will have you removed." Makey dropped back into his chair, face coloring. Prescott laid a calming hand on his arm. Eugene cleared his throat. "There is also," he said, "a sealed letter Your Honor asked me to bring, which Mr. Caldwell requested be opened if his son-in-law contested the will or the trust terms." "Well, that seems relevant," Judge Harden said. "Please submit it." Eugene produced a sealed envelope with the court's recording stamp, which the judge examined before carefully opening. He read silently for a long moment, his expression shifting from neutral to something like mild surprise. "I see," the judge said at last. "Mr. Brooks, were you aware of the details of this letter?" "In broad strokes only," Eugene replied. "Mr. Caldwell informed me he had commissioned certain investigations and wanted the results available if needed, but he did not share all the contents with me." Judge Harden nodded, flipping through attached pages. "This letter includes a narrative explanation as well as supporting documents," he said. "They appear to concern Mr. Queenland's personal and financial history, and to question his motives in relation to the marriage." Prescott stood. "Your Honor, we object to untested allegations gathered by a private investigator at the behest of a party who had an established dislike for my client." "We are not here to judge your client's character," the judge said crisply. "We are here to distribute an estate. However, this material may bear upon the divorce proceedings. I will not read it into the record today. Instead, I will forward it and its attachments to the family court handling the Queenland Caldwell case for appropriate consideration. As for the trust, I see no legal basis to question its validity." He set the papers aside. "Proceed with the remainder of the will." The rest was mostly administrative, small bequests to charities, detailed instructions for the maintenance of a scholarship fund. Nema listened with a dull ache in her chest, realizing how carefully her father had arranged everything, never mentioning any of it to her. When the session ended and the judge left, chatter rose. Makey strode toward Eugene. "What's in that letter?" he demanded. "What did he write about me?" Eugene adjusted his glasses. "That's between the court and the parties," he said calmly. "If you have questions, speak to your lawyer." "You're all colluding," Makey muttered. "You, Monty, the judge, everyone." Prescott stepped in and urged him away, speaking under his breath. Later that day, Nema sat again in Eugene's office. He placed a thick folder on the table between them. "The judge has forwarded the material to the family court," he said. "And I've prepared a copy for you. You deserve to know the truth." Nema opened it. The first pages were a report from a licensed investigator her father had hired months before his death. They detailed Makey's background, his real name, previous marriages, questionable business dealings. Each claim was backed by documents: marriage certificates, court filings, loan applications. The report said that Makey Queenland was in fact born as Eric Walls, and had divorced 2 previous wives, both of whom had been financially better off when they met him and worse off when they parted. There were notes about accusations that he had used one woman's credit to secure art supplies and left her with the debt. Another section outlined how several early works he claimed as his own showed strong similarities to obscure pieces by lesser-known artists in other states. Then Nema reached the pages that documented an attempted loan taken out 3 months before Monty's death, using forged paperwork that suggested Makey had co-ownership of Purple Leaf. The bank had flagged the documents and refused the loan, but the fact remained: he had tried to leverage her shop without her knowledge. By the time she finished reading, her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry," Eugene said quietly. "I know this is painful. But your father asked me to make sure you had the full picture if things ever came to this." "He knew," Nema whispered. "And he still lets me make my own choices." "He loved you," Eugene replied. "And he knew that sometimes people only see what they're ready to see." He handed her another envelope, smaller, addressed in Monty's careful handwriting. "This one is just for you." She opened it and read her father's last message. He wrote about his admiration for her courage in starting the shop, about his regrets for the times he'd been too harsh, about his hope that she would never settle for being diminished in any relationship. He mentioned the trust, explaining that it wasn't about controlling her, but about ensuring she would always have something that was wholly hers, no matter who came into her life. After leaving Eugene's office, Nema received a call from Martha. "I just got a copy of the court's note and the attached documents," the lawyer said. "I think Prescott has, too. He wants another meeting. Today, if possible." By mid-afternoon, they were back in a conference room. This time, Makey looked different, his confident posture shaken, his movements jerky. Prescott's tone was clipped but polite. "In light of new information," he said, "my client wishes to revisit his demands. He is prepared to waive any claim to Ms. Caldwell's business or inheritance. He will also withdraw any request for spousal support. He asks only for an equitable share of the proceeds from the sale of the jointly owned house and a fair division of personal property acquired during the marriage." Martha glanced at Nema, who gave a slight nod. "We can work with that," Martha said. "We have one condition. Mr. Queensland must sign a confidentiality agreement regarding all aspects of the marriage and divorce. No interviews, no memoirs, no public accusations." "Agreed," Prescott said immediately. Once the broad outlines were settled, Prescott asked if his client could speak with Nema briefly. Martha agreed to stand by the open door. Makey faced Nema, his eyes duller than she'd ever seen them. "Your father destroyed my life," he said quietly. "Even from the grave." "You destroyed your own life," Nema replied evenly. "He just collected the proof." "I did love you," he insisted. "In my way." "In your way," she echoed. "Which mostly meant loving what I provided." He swallowed. "They could charge me for the loan documents. If you said you didn't know, it would look worse. If you said you did, that it was your idea, it would go away." "No," she said. "I won't lie for you. Not anymore." He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it with a bitter twist. As Nema left the building, she felt the weight of years fall away piece by piece. The divorce would take a bit more paperwork and time, but the battle was over. Her business and her inheritance were safe. So was her future. On the way home, she stopped at the cemetery. The October air was crisp, and the lilies on Monty's grave had been replaced by another bouquet someone else had left. She stood there for a long moment, one hand resting on the cool stone. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing what I couldn't. For believing I'd figure it out." Then she turned and walked back to her car, the path in front of her feeling clearer than it had in years. 3 months after the divorce papers were signed, the Purple Leaf shop smelled of fresh paint and new oak shelves. Nema was there early, as she usually was these days, unlocking the door while the sun was still low and pale. Light filtered through the big front windows, scattering across stacked boxes and rows of bottles like tiny gold sparks. Life felt different now. Her old bungalow had been sold, the proceeds divided. She'd bought a smaller house closer to downtown, with a front porch and a patch of yard where she'd planted herbs and flowering shrubs. Her living space felt lighter, no stray art magazines, no beer bottles on the coffee table, no constant tension. A regular customer, Lillian, came in not long after opening, her heels clicking on the floor. She had an eye for Italian wines and a knack for picking the most interesting bottles in any price range. "You've expanded your rose section," Lillian observed approvingly. "A shipment from Provence came in," Nema said. "I thought of you when I ordered." Lillian smiled, then hesitated. "I heard something the other night," she said. "At a gallery opening. About your ex-husband." Nema felt the old reflexive tightening in her chest, but it passed quickly. "Oh." "Apparently," Lillian said, lowering her voice, "one of his pieces was pulled from a show. Someone recognized it as a copy of a painting by a younger artist from Santa Fe. There was a bit of a scandal. Now local galleries don't want to deal with him." Nema absorbed the information without much emotion. It was like hearing news about an acquaintance she barely knew. "Thank you for telling me," she said, and meant it. "I hope the young artist is okay." After Lillian left, Nema thought about how dramatically her feelings had shifted. Not long ago, news like that would have crushed her or lit up her anger. Now it mostly confirmed what she'd already learned. If someone built their life on shortcuts and excuses, eventually the structure collapsed. Soon, expansion plans began to take center stage. The space next door to Purple Leaf had come up for sale and, after some negotiation, Nema had bought it. She hired a designer, Clarissa, a sharp, creative woman, to help her combine the two spaces into one. They met in coffee shops with floor plans spread out between them, talking about tasting bars, display lighting, and how to create quiet corners where people could stay and enjoy their glasses. Rowena came by frequently, trailing behind construction workers, peeking around plastic sheeting, and offering enthusiastic commentary. "This will be perfect for events," Rowena said, pointing to a cleared section near the front. "We can host small concerts, you can invite winemakers, local artists can show their pieces." "That's the plan," Nema said. She had decided not to combine businesses formally with Rowena yet, but to build a space that could host her friends' antiques and art on a rotating basis. Rowena, of course, didn't mind. "As long as I get a corner for odd little objects and at least one cabinet for old glassware, I'm happy," she joked. Amid all of this, Nema met the architect, a man named Marcus whose firm was helping oversee the renovation. He was in his early 40s, thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor. He listened carefully when Nema described the kind of atmosphere she wanted, welcoming but not loud, modern but with warmth, and translated her ideas into sketches that immediately felt right. Over late afternoon meetings, they discovered a mutual love of travel, jazz clubs, and old movies. He never pushed personal topics, never made her feel pressured. For now, his friendship and quiet respect were more than enough. The months passed quickly. December brought holiday crowds, and sales soared. Nema hired a part-time assistant, a university student named Sarah, who proved curious and quick to learn. "One of my professors told me you'd just come through a really tough divorce," Sarah said one evening as they closed up. "I expected you to be, I don't know, sad all the time. But you're so focused." Nema smiled. "It was tough," she said honestly. "Still is, sometimes. But it also forced me to figure out what I want my life to look like. And I realized I like that answer." New Year's Eve arrived with glittering lights and the promise of change. Rowena threw a small gathering inside her cozy house, inviting a mix of old friends and new acquaintances. Eugene and his wife came, as did Martha, who turned out to have a surprisingly loud laugh. Marcus was there too, drawn in by some conversation about architecture and wine during one of the planning sessions. Around midnight, Nema stepped onto the deck to get some air. The sky above Tucson was cool and dark, pricked by stars. The sound of music drifted out behind her. "Mind some company?" Marcus asked, leaning in the doorway with 2 glasses of sparkling wine. "Not at all," she said, accepting one. They stood side by side, watching a few distant fireworks bloom above roofs and palm trees. "You've built something impressive," Marcus said after a moment. "Not just the space. The whole world around it." "I had help," she said. "Good people." "Maybe," he said. "But many people have help. Not everyone uses it to create something so alive." She didn't answer right away, but his words warmed her in a way that surprised her. When they went back inside to join the countdown, she caught Rowena's amused look and rolled her eyes with a smile. By late winter, construction delays and supply issues had finally been beaten back. The combined purple leaf space stood ready, a sleek bar stretching along one wall, tables arranged for intimate tastings, a small elevated corner that could serve as a stage. The walls were lined not only with bottles, but with art by local painters and sculptors, curated in collaboration with Rowena and a couple of gallery friends. The grand reopening was scheduled for March 1st, a date Nema had chosen intentionally. It marked exactly 1 year since the morning she'd sat at her kitchen table and told Makey she wanted a divorce. What had felt like the end of everything back then now felt like a beginning. Opening night was a whirlwind. The store was packed, regulars, friends, business owners from nearby shops, and a few journalists from local lifestyle websites. Music played softly in the background. People moved through the rooms, glasses in hand, pausing to examine art or ask Nema about a particular vineyard. "You've created something special," Caleb the professor told her. "Not just a shop. A little cultural hub." "I hope so," Nema said. That was the goal. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd thinned and conversations settled into quiet pockets, Marcus found her in the small interior patio she'd had built at the back. A string of lights glowed overhead, casting gentle light on potted plants and a simple bench. "You survived the night," he said, offering her a glass of champagne. "Barely," she joked. "I wasn't ready for that many congratulations." "That's what happens when you succeed," he said. "People like to be near it." They toasted. "To new beginnings," Marcus suggested. "To new beginnings," she agreed. Later, she stepped out alone for a moment and looked up at the sky. The air was mild, the city quiet around her. In a single year, she had gone from feeling trapped in a marriage that drained her to standing in a space she had dreamed up and brought to life, surrounded by people who respected her and by work that thrilled her. There had been grief and anger, ugly courtroom moments and revelations she could never have imagined. But there had also been kindness from strangers, loyalty from friends, and a strength inside herself she'd underestimated for years. Her father had once told her, a little gruffly, that she was tougher than she seemed. Standing there with the soft sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifting from inside, she finally believed him. She took a slow breath and let it out, feeling that this wasn't a happy ending so much as the start of a better story. There would be more challenges, more choices, more ordinary days and unexpected turns. But this time, she would face them on her own terms, with her head clear and her heart open. Somewhere far away, her ex-husband was starting over again, chasing another mirage. She felt no desire to follow his story anymore. Hers was here, in the warm light of the purple leaf, in the faces of the people who came through its door, and in the quiet certainty that she had finally stepped into her own life. And if someday someone listening to her story found the courage to leave a place where they weren't truly valued, Nema thought that might be the best toast she could imagine to everything she had endured, and everything she'd built since.